What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel for the best hybrid Barbarian build, which is going to be the Whirlwind Thorns. It's super fast, and in this part of the video, which if you guys haven't seen the first part, which is kind of a progression series of about 1 to 70, this is going to be the max level guide, which essentially comes down to the paragon choices, and we're trying to be as fast as possible. That's what the niche build of Whirlwind and Thorns in a hybrid build is going to allow you to do. It's going to be one of the fastest builds in the game for Barbarian, and that is simply due to the amount of movement speed you can get. You can cap out at 200% quite easily, even without perfect pieces of gear. So, starting right off, I was going to actually hold off and wait for the season to start because we can get some newer items, but a lot of you guys wanted the video, so we're going to drop it now. And if there are any updates in any patches, because even if I drop it when the patch comes out, sometimes 2 or 3 days later, they just nerf something, right? So, just keep that in mind that the videos pinned comment will have the exact build, and if there's any updates, I'll just have the update in here. Obviously, otherwise we'd have to make a separate video. So just want to go ahead and start off the video with that because they are just nerfing things left and right, especially with the Barbarian. I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed. So starting right off, let's go ahead and go over what essentially changes here. It really comes down to really stretching your paragon board because there's not very many insane legendary nodes that the Barbarian has. However, you definitely really want to stretch your tree because for some reason on the Barbarian, just in general on the Glyphs, a lot of them don't add that much damage. Like specifically if you go into, like, let's say seeding with swords, a lot of other builds, even after you max it out, some builds will have like about a 10% increase per node selected, but for whatever reason they decided on Barbarian just have a lot of the numbers cut. It's probably because Barbarian has 4 weapons. So just to answer really quickly, also on the paragon board, like some people wonder, well, like this gives you plus strength, this thing gives you extra strength. Well, a lot of the things in Barbarian, for some reason on the Glyphs, when you're putting in more points into things, the damage just doesn't add up correctly in terms of being equal on other Paragon boards. Again, some of them would be like 7 or 9.9%, but again, Barbarians, there's a lot of like 5% instead of like the other values. Again, it's to kind of keep the Barbarian in check because you have the extra weapons, therefore you have more like crit damage, vulnerable damage, or core skill damage, and that's kind of a way that Barbarian got nerfed, like hidden in terms of like how the game was designed. So just as a heads up. Anyways, let's get started with what I want to go over and what essentially changes from 70 to 100. Honestly, it comes down to obviously min-maxing your pieces of gear, but you really want to try to make your build as fast as possible. You're seeing a lot of times I'm just going over the monster once or twice, and I still have, look at my Fury, I'm still at pretty much relatively high Fury, and we're going to try to keep our Fury generation as high as possible, as well as different mechanics to basically not need to use our generator. The difference between like a Hoda Barbarian and a Whirlwind Barbarian really comes down to the speed. Whirlwind is by a long shot way faster. Hoda hits a lot harder, but you're going to have to build up your resource, or if you happen to have enough shouts and good enough gear, then you have a lot more regen, so you can spam Hammer of the Ancients more often, but that's basically the difference between like a Hoda Barb and like a Whirlwind Barb. However, since we have Thorns in the build, it kind of clears up some of the smaller trash monsters. Also, Thorns applies vulnerability, so on your first hit, you don't have to worry about applying it, so that is a nice little touch. And on top of that, it's going to give us resource because one thing I've been really enjoying is adding in Umbral, and when you apply Thorns, you apply a bleed, and then you can also apply a slow. So that's one of the bigger changes, is really adding the Umbral aspect to the build, and you want to make sure you get a perfectly 4 roll on it. So starting right off, let's go over what I want to start off with, which is how are we going so fast? This is a very frequently asked question. So how we go fast in the build is basically getting as much movement speed as possible. So the base movement speed, okay, so this means it's up 100% of the time. We're going to be getting movement speed on our boots. We're also going to be getting our movement speed on our amulet, as well as in the skill tree, there is another node over here where you can get additional movement speed. This is up 100% of the time. Now, to cap out, you need to be using specific ability. So one thing that's going to help out is Rallying Cry. And then also on the Paragon board, we get extra movement speed when we kill an elite. There's 28% up on the Paragon board for additional movement speed, if I just type it in over here. So there's additional 28 over here. And then on top of that, there is additional movement speed when we have Berserking active. So there's a lot of different ways where we can get Berserking, but this is one way that's going to give us additional movement speed. And then also on crit as an aspect. So that's how we are able to move at 200%, which is maximum speed in the game, with the exception of maybe some special things. But that's how we go super fast. The next thing I want to go over that's very important, and another frequently asked question is, Slidra, how do you have so much crit in your build? You need to look for a perfectly rolled aspect, and you need to put it on your two-hand, which is going to be the Dire Whirlwind. So this makes it so it's a lot easier to kill bosses, because essentially Whirlwind loses out to speed on bosses, because Hoda, you can just hit 2 or 3 times, the boss is dead. Whereas Whirlwind, you need a channel for a little bit. The difference is still going to make Whirlwind way faster for clearing the entire Nightmare dungeon. However, on the bosses, while Hoda can kill it in maybe like 2 seconds, for Whirlwind, it could take a little bit longer, maybe 5-10 seconds, because you have to start stacking the bleed. You have to wait for the Whirlwind to get like high crit. On average, most people will be about 70-ish% crit just with this aspect alone. As long as it rolls perfect, you got 48%. You also want to get perfect rolls on your rings. That is going to be 7.5%, and that will give you an additional 15, and then your gloves can have an additional 12. Now, another thing I want to go and mention, since the last update, Gores had taken a big nerf to the point where it's not even really viable in terms of running. There's other options that you can place for the chest. You can run the Rage chest, which will actually be a unique item, which gives you extra cooldown reduction when you start bleeding elites, or if you want to, you can run Razorplate. It's totally up to you. I feel like for most people, it's going to be a lot better just to run a legendary chest piece with additional thorns, getting maximum life, and then also damage reduction, and on top of that, you also get another legendary power that you can put on compared to the other options, but keep that in mind. Another thing I want to mention, which was actually a frequently asked question, which is like, why are you going for attack speed? You can even run another aspect that gives you more attack speed when you crit with the core skill. And some people are like, well, you don't get additional ticks of Whirlwind when you actually get additional attack speed. And while that is true, that helps out with your basic attack, which is Lunging Strike. That's going to make it so you can build up resources much faster on the bosses. However, if you want to get lucky hit chance instead of attack speed, hey, that's totally up to you. It depends on how you like the game to feel. Pretty much we're getting enough damage to the point where like I personally like the way that the game feels with additional attack speed, but that is going to be up to you. And another thing that is very important, when you are using your Whirlwind, you want to make sure that it is using the slicing. Do not use the 2 one-handers. That is going to significantly decrease your DPS, even if you're running swords, because some people were looking at the build and they're like, well, on the Paragon board, you're just running swords. And the thing is that yes, this would still activate when you're, getting the bonus damage and stuff with the swords or extra regen. However, you will get way more damage with your two-hander. That's the big difference over here. So another thing I want to mention, that you do want to run the two-handed axe expertise. Originally, I updated the build in the previous one to show this off, but you do not want to run the two-handed. It will not actually stack. There's a thing that you could do before. It doesn't matter. They've actually nerfed the different way to like actually apply the bleed, which before you can hit for billions of damage, but this got nerfed way before the game really came out for release here. But nonetheless, you do actually want to run the two-handed axe expertise. You don't actually need to have the weapon equipped to get the bonus, but when using any weapon, you just gain the other bonus, and when you're equipping the weapon, you'll just get the whatever bonus that is actually applied. So those are kind of some of the updates that I wanted to go over really quick. But in terms of the pieces of gear, let's go over the important pieces of stats. As we're min-maxing, we're looking for the best rolls. So let's go over the gear, and then we'll also briefly go into the Paragon board. So the skills haven't changed. It's basically just like every single Barbarian build. Triple Shouts, Wrath of the Berserker. If you want to, you can mix and match some of these. I mean, the only thing that's really important is you're running Whirlwind and Lunging Strike, because Lunging Strike applies that chance for Berserking when you actually crit. But that's basically going to be the same for most Barbarian builds, and it probably will be the same until things get changed in the game. Hopefully we'll get some update on basically being able to like 100% upkeep like certain shouts, and then we can kind of change up certain items in terms of the Paragon board as well. But for the most part, that's basically in every Barbarian build. But if you do want to, you can run a lot of different things in the game. Alternative things, if you do want to go ahead and change it up, Iron Skin is a fantastic skill. There's a Leap Quake variant with like Ground Stomp to basically upkeep Wrath of the Berserker, and you can run Walking Arsenal, but that's getting way too deep into a completely different build, which I didn't want to cover. But if you want to, you can mix and match certain things. But the thing that's most important really on the skill tree is there's really nothing that beats Unbridled Rage. It is just by far so much more damage. But let's go ahead and go over the pieces of gear. So the important things I will go over really quick. So cooldown reduction in your helmet, as well as getting maximum life. Those are the two important stats. The rest of the stuff, if you can get strength, that's great. Fury, that's okay as well. On the chest piece, the things that you want, because we're running a hybrid build, ideally you want to get thorns, and you do want to go ahead and get maximum life, and getting damage reduction is great. And then we'll talk more about the aspects after. So under gloves, crit strike chance is really important, and the ranks to Whirlwind. And then you do definitely want to try to, if you can, get lucky hit. That's optional if instead of strength, or if you want attack speed. Again, those are two optional, but crit strike chance and Whirlwind are the most important things. And then for our pants, we just really want to get thorns, maximum life, get armor, damage reduction from closest, all great. And then for the boots, the most important thing with the boots, guys, is fury cost reduction and movement speed, because the whole point of playing any, speed build is to go as fast as possible, and so I don't have to activate our lunging strike. Yeah, fury cost reduction is great. The lunging strike is great to apply berserking though, and also it can apply more damage specifically on bosses. And then we're still running basically the same thing for our bludgeoning weapon, so you just want to get vulnerable damage, crit strike damage, core skill damage, and strength. This is kind of basically there on every single build, or you can get all stats instead of strength. That's also great. And then again, vulnerable crit, it's like the same thing on our swords, so no big difference there. And then same thing with our other sword, since we have 4 weapons here. And then as far as our our rings go, we want crit strike damage, crit strike chance, and vulnerable damage. Kind of similar. I do actually really value getting life. Life is really good in the game, so get as much life as you can possibly get. Pretty much the same thing on the other ring. And then for our amulet, we're looking for cooldown reduction, as well as movement speed and fury cost reduction. Those are the 3. The last one, you can get damage reduction, cut to the bone. You can get a lot of different things. For the last one, you can just get flat thorns if it rolls it. Although flat thorns, you only get 1,000. With it. In terms of the skills, again, everything is the exact same. Now, in terms of the aspects, so we're playing Whirlwind, we want to suck everything. Alternatively, you can remove it. I've actually been playing a lot without it, and it is totally fine. The thing that you do get with it is obviously, yeah, it groups up, but it's like kind of random on when it works. Sometimes it just works, and it pulls like one enemy because you've already cleared out the area. So if you really want to drop this, honestly, it's totally fine. This one is great for survivability, giving you some sort of way to have fortification is great in the game. And then this one is really great. The one where when we're attacking with a basic skill, it's going to increase the damage of our next core skill. So we're going to build up our Fury, and then we're going to expend it all kind of by just holding down that Whirlwind. And then on top of that, getting the Disobedience, which is one of the best ones, just gives us extra armor. And then on top of that, getting the extra movement speed, because the whole point of a Whirlwind build is to be as fast as possible. Then, because it's a hybrid build, we would definitely want to put Thorns on our two-hander, because we want that highest chance. Sometimes when there is a boss that spawns in and there's a bunch of ads, you'll see it pop instantly. This is kind of a frequently asked question. They're like, dude, how did you do one shot? What happens is there's a bunch of things, and let's say Whirlwind sucks everything up. That Thorns chance to do the AoE Thorns damage around us is huge, especially because it's going to apply instantly, and that's how things pop, essentially. Some people are wondering, like, are you getting some crazy overpower? No, we don't do overpower. This just lets things pop. It's great. If you really want to drop Thorns, you can completely drop Thorns, with the exception of having at least one Thorn in your build. That doesn't actually have to roll in your item. You can just get it in your skill tree. The reason why is you need to apply some sort of slow for Umbral to actually work. So, yeah. And then another great one to have is Limitless Rage. So, when we're getting additional Fury, and since we have so much Fury generation here in our build in the Paragon board, this is going to be excellent. So it's going to make it so each point of Fury we generate while we're at maximum will actually make our next core skill do more. Sometimes we'll be getting overflowed on Fury, and this will actually activate the next one, but usually you'll attack once anyways. It's great though. But next up over here, we have this one over here, the Edge Master. So more damage, the more resource we have. You can also pop potions to give you additional resource. That helps out. And then for our amulet, we're running the one that gives us Thorns while Berserking. Alternatively, again, you can select a different one. The reason why I like this one so much on the amulet in particular is because it gives us a massive amount of Thorns. That's basically half of a Razorplate, which is the unique item that gives us no stats. If you want to run Razorplate, by all means run Razorplate. You're going to have a lot more problems in the survivability department if not all of your rolls are really good elsewhere. But if your rolls are really good and you're like, well, I can take the amount of damage, then by all means, go ahead and feel free to run Razorplate. That gives you more damage, especially to smaller enemies. Razorplate isn't necessarily the greatest against certain bosses unless they're doing lots of fast hits, but yeah, Razorplate can be another option, and then you can run something else in the amulet, but I like this. It gives you so much Thorns, it's crazy. Then we're running the Berserking Fury, so just more Fury while we are Berserking, so it's just free energy. And on top of this, this is kind of like the change over here. Now this one's a little bit rare to get the perfect roll, but if you can get Umbral, You can also run Penitent Greaves to proc this, but because your bleed, well, if your Thorns applies bleed, then on top of that, your bleed applies slow. And we have that 1 point into that on the tree, and that's going to apply the slow. And when enemies are super far away, they take the Thorns damage, and then they're going to be basically giving you extra resource from super far away, which is excellent. And then over here we have the Whirlwind, the Dire Whirlwind, which is going to give us increased crit. So let's go over the Paragon board, because this is actually the most important thing. So again, I've already talked about the thing where I mentioned why I'm not putting a lot of points into like the bonuses, because the bonuses are relatively small. So starting right off on Exploit, so we're going to get Exploit earlier on because it's the best way for Barbarian to really help apply vulnerability without having to use, let's say, like any other like weird thing where you have to use like Chain Grab or other things. This is just excellent. And then we're going to go up here. And then we're going to grab Martial. So some of these I have swapped the locations of, just as a heads up. Some of these, there can be interchanged. This just helps us out with our shout cooldown. You'll notice we're not playing the Rage unique chest, but that can be an optional chest if you want to run it. But this is just excellent for being able to try to upkeep your shouts a little bit more. And then on the third one, we're going to get Seething. This is how I have a lot of resource. So while we have a sword, we gain 3 Fury when we kill an enemy. That's how my Fury is generally going to be relatively high as long as there is some sort of density. And going into the future, because I want to future-proof this video, there is going to be more density added. I'm not sure if this is coming out on the 18th or if this is actually coming out on the Season 1 or Season 2, but they did say that they're going to be increasing density, which makes this way better as well. So that's going to be a nice little change. And then after we go ahead and grab Seething over here, getting Decimator is okay. This is optional. It just helps out on bosses to apply vulnerability once again because, well, otherwise we're going to have to wait for Exploit end. Unless we're playing Hoda, the boss may survive for more than 3 seconds, so it may take 5 seconds to kill a boss, or even 10 seconds depending on what boss it is. Some bosses that kind of move around a little bit, and it also depends on how much you can hold your Whirlwind to have that increased crit from your Dire Whirlwind. So yeah, Decimator can be okay for that. And then we're just going to go down and we can get this Wrath over here. So Wrath is really good because its skills that critically strike generate 3 Fury. And if we keep on critting, and we're going to have that Dire Whirlwind, which gives us basically half of our crit right there. Excellent indeed. And then we're going to actually go back up, and we're going to go to the Warbringer over here, and we're going to actually get in Territorial. Territorial is actually pretty good because it does 9.9. That's the number I was talking about. A lot of builds just in general in this game have certain numbers, and they just kind of like add up. But for some reason on Barbarians, they just have like a lower number. Like on Seething, it's a 5 versus, again, a lot of them are 7 and 9. That's why we don't spec into it. That's why we can stretch our board further to get more bonuses. So Territorial is excellent for that reason. We also get some damage reduction, but we actually do want to grab Warbringer here. It just gives us extra survivability. If you really want more damage, hey, there's other options for more damage. There's other like nodes that you can grab that give you more Fury, and that can be an option if you don't want to grab Warbringer. This one's kind of optional, but it keeps your character alive. There's also extra Fury over here. So if you really want to, you can grab this Fury, and there's additional, I think there's Fury, yeah, right here, Fury and Life, which if you want to, and you're like, you know, I just want to get as much resource as possible, hey, go down there and then drop Warbringer. This is more for survivability. And then we will lastly go for the Flawless Technique and Disembowel. So we're not going to grab Flawless Technique, but that's the name of the board. And then we're just going to not grab this. We actually just want this so we can get Disembowel. So what this does is it makes so if you kill a bleeding enemy, which we're always going to be applying bleed, we have a chance to reduce the cooldowns of our non-ultimate active cooldowns by 1 second. This is something where some people have asked me, like, you know, how sometimes my cooldowns don't seem to be like that high. Do I have extra cooldown reduction that they're unaware of? No, it's just that there's just sometimes you get really lucky in a big pack and you get like 4 or 5 seconds of cooldown reduction, and then you can have your abilities up again. So it's quite nice for that. But yeah, I mean, it has all the text, and it will be down there in the pinned comment for all the names. So we get Exploit, Martial, Seething, Wrath. So those 4 are important in terms of the order. The other ones, it's up to you. We did move around some of these just as a heads up from the previous one, so if you want to, you can move them around. It's just like I kind of min-max here for efficiency, just because certain other positionings of the Paragon board may be a little bit more like efficient, like we can save like 1 point because we're really penny pinching here. We're trying to go for a min-maxing. So yeah, that's basically going to be wrapping things up for the best Whirlwind Thorns hybrid guide. And there's really not too many guides with a hybrid build in general, but it is really fun. Again, if you guys want to swap out Thorns, feel free to go ahead and do that, and then instead of getting Thorns, you can just get more damage reduction. But you need to at least put 1 point into Thorns because you do need to, in terms of the skill tree, apply that slow, which is this thing right here. This is what's very important for the build to run properly. So at least get 1 Thorn on something. Well, you need to get Thorns applies bleed, so you can just get 1 point into this, and then this one over here, they take the bleed damage, and then you can get hamstring, and then everything is going to be a-okay. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll update this build. Like I said, I know I'm dropping this like a day before. We're getting one of the patches, but I don't think they're going to be nerfing Barb's Whirlwind and Thorns. Maybe they would nerf Hoda, but we'll have to wait and see, and we may update the video. So if you see anything that's a little bit different in the pinned comment for the build, it's because maybe certain things have been changed and buffed and or nerfed. But anyways, that's going to wrap it up. Enjoy, guys. Have fun with Barbarian. Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you guys are somehow brand new here and decided just to watch this video and you want to see an update to this build as well as other things later down the line when the season comes out, hit subscribe to the bell and you'll definitely see more. But thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next one. Peace.